We are live. Hello and welcome to Community Manager Live. I'm David Dewald, Community Manager at Sienna and current runner of the CommunityManager.com. Each week we bring a collection of community professionals together to discuss a topic suggested by our audience, you. If you would like to chat along with us, today you can do so on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch, where we can pull in your discussion, comments, and questions right into our stream. So you can participate as we go. If you would prefer to just listen or watch, you can do so on Twitter or LinkedIn. You can find all of those links at the top of our page on CommunityManager.com. Very good. I'm going to introduce my co-host, Tim McDonald, and then we're going to go around the horn and meet everybody today.
And since we have so many people, I'm going to be really quick. I am Tim McDonald. I am at TA McDonald on Twitter, which is where I will be spending most of today because we have such an awesome group of people here. And I am the head of community at homeroom.club. And I will pass it over to Isabel.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, so my name is Isabel. I'm a community manager for an internal product and content team for a company, a property management company called Muse. So I have been in the tech space close to over 8 years, primarily as a customer success manager. And now I have moved to the wonderful world of community building. That's me.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amale Chuku from Nigeria. I'm leading the Solo Nigeria community. I'm also a Web3 community builder. So that's all from me.
Wesley?
Hello, my name is Wesley Faulkner. I am a senior community manager at AWS, Amazon Web Services. But that's relatively new for the last 4 months. But I've been doing community for over a decade for startups, for enterprises, for nonprofits, every kind of flavor. And so I'll pass it over to you, Deb.
Hey there, I am Deb Shell. I'm a community consultant and the host of the Community Strategy podcast. I'm going to toss it over to Chris.
Hi, everyone. Chris Dutzel. I'm a director of customer community and engagement at Reltio. It's a master data management tech company. And I'm also the we have a Peers Over Beers kind of community management podcast as well. So check it out.
I hate to go after that. That was wonderful, Chris. My name is Jillian Benbow. I'm the Director of Community Experience for SPI Media, repping with the shirt today. And I'm also the hostess with the mostest on the Community Experience podcast. And I expect to talk to all of you later to be on the show. Jenny's been on it, so I will pass it to Jenny.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny Weigel. I'm a community strategy consultant. Enterprise brands come to me when they want to create their very first digital customer community. And you can find more out about me by typing jenny.community into your browser. Let's go over to Mary.
Hi, everybody. I am the Director of Developer Relations at a company called Camunda. We are a process automation and orchestration company with source available code that you can contribute back to and all of those nice things. Developer relations includes the community management side of things for those of you who aren't familiar with the term, but it also includes developer advocacy. So folks who are writing content about the product, who are kind of the customer zero on that side of things, as well as developer experience, people who are responsible to make sure that a lot of the points of friction or barriers to entry for the product are resolved and people have the best experience possible.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate that. Hey, thank you to Gift and Jeff Rowe, who have joined us in the chat. We'll be looking for your questions and comments. Our first question up for today is going to be, I've just been given this community. I've never done this before. Where do I start? Any
I'll kick
takers?
that off. So
I was going to say, it's like, who's going to start with this question?
It's a big question.
yeah, it's a really tough question, but you know, the way I would kind of take that is that it'd be similar to starting a community, in my opinion. You go into an organization, and obviously you want to look at the community, but I think it's about understanding what that community's goals are, and understanding, you know, what they're trying to accomplish, and see if they're still trying to accomplish those things. And the big thing is who are the advocates internally to really help you drive that, to help you fund that, and those kinds of things. And so really that's where I would start. And I'm going to just it's not simple, but it's really that simple, if that makes sense. So
I can hop in there too. I would say if you're brand new, figure out what your job is. I think there's a misconception that people know what community is, and that includes the people who determine whether or not you're successful and you keep your job. So talk to those people, make sure they're all on the same page, because your stakeholders aren't necessarily just your manager. It could be the people who talk to your manager about saying how good of or how bad of a job you're doing. So have that be clear about what the expectations are, what kind of lift they expect from your role, and also to define the type of influence that they expect you to have on the community.
I can hop in there next. I would say, in addition to figuring out what your priorities are and what the expectations are for those people who have given you this role, talk to other people who have done it for a while, right? With community management in particular, it's not a new thing, even though we are still figuring a lot of things out. But community management has been around for centuries, right? It might have been bringing people together in a single place or different things like that, versus now it's a lot of times bringing people together online or at events or things like that. But find people who have done community management, do some research and figure out what really resonates with you, and then reach out to those content producers, content creators. The fact that we are involved in community and like generally our jobs and like doing community work usually means we are all willing to share and willing to learn together and willing to help others. It's one of the things that I love the most about this community is everyone is so willing to talk and share and mentor and make sure that other people understand their experiences so we can all learn and grow together.
And to jump on a live stream by everyone who's joined today as well.
It's true.
I kind of want to look at it from just a slightly shifted perspective, not which all of this is great. When I read this question, I also think about, okay, I've been given this community. How, what do I do? Where do I start? I think about the member experience and just the creating relationships with the people in that community. So for me, that's having an open door policy, whether it's having like times or reaching out individually to different members to just say like, hey, you're in this community. Why? What is it that you joined for? What do you think? What do you like? And just building relationships with the people in the community. And with the caveat that if this is like an enterprise community sort of situation, the things you learn from your community members may be different from the objectives of which you were hired for. And so that's a good thing to know at the jump, because you're going to have to figure out how do I communicate with who's hired me to be successful, but also how do I communicate with this group of members that are here and make sure they feel cared for and fulfilled. So welcome to community management.
I also want to add a perspective too, actually a little similar to what Wesley said. If the question says, I've just been given this community, so I'm assuming this is already an active community. This is not a brand new community, but that's just an assumption I'm making. So in addition to the relationship building that Jillian mentioned, yes, absolutely do that. You also want to start relationship building within the company. So if this community has already been going for a little while in your organization or nonprofit company where, there are some people who might have certain thoughts on it, positive or negative. So I would say start a roadshow internally and start speaking to the leaders of different teams and finding out what are their thoughts on the community, what have they liked, not liked about it, and emphasize to them how community can help them. And I'm realizing we're just giving you a lot of things to start. But hopefully this helps. Hopefully one of these things is going to be a good starting point for you. But it's all good advice.
That's a good point to connect with all the teams. I feel like community can be the center of the universe for a company, that they should have their hands in every department, because they can impact so many things. They can inform marketing, they can help with product development, they can help with support, all of those places that you can just weasel your way into, and make yourself kind of help the community solve their problems with their but you can also help the company solve the problems that the community can help them solve. Anyone else want to take a stab? I think you're muted, Tim.
I forgot I did that because I was typing on Twitter. I didn't want that noise to come through. I just wanted to expand on something Mary said about reaching out to others that are experienced in community, especially if it's in the same field as you. We went to the CMX Summit this past week in Redwood City, and our CEO just came away and said, this is the most understanding and giving group of people I've been around. And so don't be intimidated by the fact that somebody has experience. Feel free to reach out, because almost everybody in this profession that I know is one, a good listener, and two, willing to share information.
Very good. Anyone else? We'll move on to the next one. Nope. Okay. All right. So Jenny mentioned this. The assumption in the first question was that you have a community. So now we're going to flip it and say you don't have a community. You've just been told, the CEO has stopped by your desk because you're an amazing person and said, we should probably do this community thing. I've heard it could work for our company. And so you're in this situation. Never done it before. Don't actually have a community. How do you start? Where do you start? Where do you begin?
I want to pop in here for sure. I think the first place to start is validating whether a community makes sense, and asking leadership, asking departments, asking your ideal members, like finding those ideal people, whether it's customers or if it's a customer support community, whether it's a different kind of community. You've got to know why who's going to be a part of it and why. So I think starting with those purpose statements are the most important thing to start with. And that starts with validation of either dating a survey, sending that out to maybe some customers, and maybe asking them just like 3 questions of, hey, we're thinking about doing an online community. Would that be interesting to you? And, here's 3 ideas. If you're interested in talking more to us, give us your email so we can contact you, and starting maybe with a focus group or something like that. That's typically how I recommend getting started with even just validating whether or not to take on a community. So that would be there.
Yeah, it's
So,
funny you say. Go ahead.
So thank you. Going to hop in from there. So, getting started as someone who has never done this before, I think, what I usually do, or what I would suggest somebody should do that is quite simple, is to just go look for a community management job. Try to look out for the job descriptions. I think you really find easy lineups and steps on what you actually need. Basic skills you need, and some features you need to, characteristics you need to have as a community manager that will help you do perfectly well. But before doing that, I think you would need to look at a company or the project that needs the community. Find out exactly what you think they will need a community for. There are lots of things that could be involved. Talking about the value that community members will be needing. Talking about the community platform that would engage the community you are trying to build. For me, I believe majority of Web3 communities are built majorly on Discord as a community platform. So these are basic things that you need to look out for whenever you're getting started. And also, it will also be nice to get experience from people who have already done this before. Maybe try to reach out to people who are really doing well there. You get some insights from them. Little information can really be worth it, because as a community manager, you deal with lots of people, and any wrong you do change a lot of things. So that's basically what I could add here.
Yeah, it's so Deb mentioned that, figure out if there's a reason for community. So her assumption, and to me, was more of I'm already hired at this company doing something else. But if you're hiring me, my assumption for a community leader position is that we're going to build a community. And the way I would go in about it is with the assumption of I'm going to build this community, but without knowing the goals, the vision, and all of those things, I've got to create those things. I've got to figure out, why are we doing community? What purpose is it going to serve? And three, yeah, we're going to reach out to the audience or the users and things like that. But going to these B2B companies, SaaS companies, pretty much most of these companies need a community of some sort. And so I'm going with the assumption that they need it, but then I'm internally building relationships for the first 2, 3, 4 weeks, knowing exactly what I need, but I have to understand kind of at the high level when I think of, the chief customer officer, the CEO, the product leader, all those kind of folks is, what do they know about community and what don't they know about community? And how can I start talking about what community can do for them? And then two is, and not at the executive level, is whenever I look at those really smart people that are generally individual contributors internally that can help me answer questions, that can help me build a webinar program, that can help me with content strategy and all those kinds of things. So I'm building all that out, and then I'm thinking about, what is our mission for community, what is our vision for community, and then at the end of the day, what are the key priorities that we're going to try to accomplish, go after, and then how am I going to be measured? And I'm going to be the one that comes up with that, because you know what, I want to make it as easy as possible in the very beginning to be measured by, because at the same time, you build a community, they don't come. Two is, it's a slow build. It doesn't just all of a sudden you build one and then all of a sudden you have this amazing community. And that's a really, I think people think that within 6 months, this thing's just going to be amazing. Now, I'll say this and be done with this part, is that you tell the story as well. So in these 6 months, as you're building, you've got to be that storyteller to the organization. Get in front of many people as possible, talk about it, presentations, in front of the organization and those kinds of things. Build that buzz, build that, excitement, about what you're trying to do and what community can do for the organization, but also what community can do for your users at the end of the day. So.
Yeah, and something that's to what Dev mentioned as well, like my community is just 2 months old basically, and it is an internal community. So something that really helped me from the very start was to actually set up a 90-day roadmap. And this was actually part of my presentation prior of me getting the job. So for me, it was quite, and maybe because it is an internal product team. So I was even trying to have interviews, like user interviews with management, with all of the product managers, just to find out their interests, their motivations. And as many of the people here have been mentioning about what's going to make the either members, users to actually join and continue the community, even if it's in internal and external community.
I'm going to hop in here just to mention that everyone has talked about 2 stools of the 3 constraints, which is what is the list of things that need to be taken care of. And Isabella just talked about the timeline in which that needs to be done. But it's important to think about that 3rd stool as well, which is resources. How much time, how much money are they going to give you? How much staff, internal resources, how much you have influence over other departments and their priorities, their messaging channels, and all that stuff. So after you have all those things that everyone said, and I totally agree with, also understand what kind of resources they will give you to empower you to be successful in this role.
Well, and Wesley, I think that you have to that's true. 1, before you take the job, make sure you have budget, right? So 2 is, a lot of times those resources don't come until you prove it out. And that's my experience with building a community from ground up. Not always, but they're not going to give you a ton of resources. But if you have budget, you can, for content, you could go to upwork.com and start kind of pushing out blogs or videos or whatever, right? And finding those kinds of things. So you get third-party research. Just be smart about, how you might if you don't have a person, then how do you go find those resources, whether it's third party or internally, which I've used as well. But I build those relationships internally because they have another job that they're doing, but you know what? I'm going to pull them in to do a show or a webinar, or I'm going to pull them in to answer questions. I'm going to get a list of every product manager out there and what are their duties and what do they do on a daily basis. And if they're an API guru or a data kind of person that knows this specific area of the product, then I'm going after them to answer the question. And so you've just got to be smart about what a resource is. So, because a lot of times they're not just going to, here's 10 people or here's one person. Usually it's just you at first, and then you got to kind of build that out. And then over time you get that resource or two.
In addition to resources, bandwidth. It's one thing if you've come into this role and it is your full-time job, you can probably assume you will have all the bandwidth to work on starting the community. But if you have a different role and you're now being tasked with doing this in addition, talk to your manager about the bandwidth, the expectations of how much time they're expecting you to put towards this, so that you can plan accordingly.
The one thing that I want to go backwards a little bit and add is I think a lot of what we're talking about is, do you want what we call an owned community? Do you want to build a community that lives on your website, that is branded with your company name, all of those types of things? And one of the things that I always remind people of, and have to remind myself of sometimes too, is regardless if you've taken the time to build one of those owned communities on a forum or things like that, a community of your users likely exists. And if it's a brand new company, a brand new product, maybe that community doesn't exist yet, but then the community of people who could use your product exists. So from my side, the thing that I always do before I consider, do we want an owned community? Do we want to build our own community on our website? Is going back to what Deb said originally, that's kind of the question that you ask when you figure out, do we have enough traction here to do this? Before that, I always go try to figure out, where are those people now? Are they on Slack? Are they on discourse forums? Are they on live streams like this? Are there blogs that they frequent? Are there different things that they're accessing already? Because those are places that I can start to get to know the individuals who might be interested in using our product down the road, before we decide, yes, we want our own community on our website.
Such a good point. And I want to just pop in and say, questions are like super powerful. And I feel like when you start to ask questions to, for example, internal teams, talking to people, we have a client that I worked with recently who was tasked with this exact thing. And she doesn't have, they just said, we want 100,000 people or something like that by X date. And that doesn't really clarify who are the people, what departments are helping us out and anything like that. So basically, going back to what Chris was saying, was we explained, well, if this is education and the marketing team is working on education materials for people who are at this stage, then is that the community we're building for, or are we building for a different kind of community? What problem is this community solving? And so I think asking those kinds of questions in the beginning, from leadership, from internal teams, and then being able to circle back and be like, oh, customer service is telling us we have this problem. How can the community solve this? Oh, maybe here's how the community can solve this. And then that merits us being able to say, this is part of the equation. We need support from customer service to give us data and resources. And then that's what we put towards our proposal to talk to leadership around resources for. But finding that really hard line of, what problem does this community solve, and talking with people. Also content, by the way, any of these interviews that you do with people, all of the data, that goes right to content that you can repurpose and use for your community, and scaling it and growing it. So I think those are all, everything you use can be reused in some way. I think it's all great to ask those questions and keep asking questions.
A couple of you touched on this, so I think it's a good time to bring this question up. So if I'm new to a community or new to community management, there's probably going to be some kind of an expectation that I grow the community and get more people into the community. Chris mentioned it, Deb mentioned it. So I just want to kind of ask, how should we set internal expectations for that? Because Chris said it's not always a fast process. It's not a if you build it, he will come kind of situation. So how do you set internal expectations for that?
The first
I
thing
can
I
just say it, by the way. Just say it.
all of us
You know,
wanna
it's
answer this question.
it's being blunt, it's being open, and it's just saying, what it is at the end of the day. 2 months from now, it's still going to be very light. Just set them hard and just be very upfront is the key. Sorry, Mary, I think you wanted to say something.
No, it's okay. There were a bunch of us who all tried to jump on at the same time. The thing that I will add, I always emphasize quality over quantity. So I care far more about having 10 really engaged, really helpful, really interested community members than I do 10,000, right? The 10,000 number is a great one for marketing to put on their website. We have this many community members. But if you have 10, 15, 20 people, even 5 people at the beginning who are super engaged, willing to give that feedback, really interested in contributing and collaborating, that's going to give the full company far more value than growing it quickly with people who might hop in once a year.
And if I can throw this out there, Mary and Chris, what will you say when your manager is actually asking for metrics? Good old metrics.
I think metrics are the key at the end of the day, right? Like you have to, one, understand what your goals are. So, if your goals are when you first start a community, look, I mean, Mary hit on it. Engaged users are the best, but you still have to bring people into the community. So, one thing that I would say from a metric standpoint is look at registrations. That it's a key thing that is sexy, but, it's not the single most important thing, but it's something that people understand. And then 2, how much content is actually being created? Because at the end of the day, content is queen. And if you don't have it, they're not going to come. It's like, you go to a party and nobody's at that party. Nobody wants to do that. And so, you could look at, maybe it's number of blogs, maybe discussions, replies. I don't know. It just kind of depends on what you're trying to accomplish. And the last thing I'll say is when you build your goals, go up to the business goals. So, I report into the CMO today. And so the marketing goals, go up all the way to the company goals, but my community goals are directly from the marketing thing. But because community touches almost every part of the organization, I also have customer success type goals, like how many accounts are in the community. The goal is to get 100%, which will never happen, but still, your goals need to even product goals like ideation and making the product better. There's some other things that you need to kind of look at, but you can't do it all at once. Be kind to yourself in the beginning. Don't if somebody thinks you can get 1,000 users within a year, make it a goal and then drive that roadmap and tactics to drive those things, right? But you need a strategy, you need a roadmap, and you need to tie it into some of those business goals and outcomes. What are the outcomes that the community is actually going to create? So it's long-winded, but
yeah,
The one thing that
I'm going with what Chris actually said. I think it's necessary to put out distinctions towards what community management and marketing is all about, because I think it definitely help understand this maybe thing of metrics or internal expectations. Because if you request a marketer to run an ad for you or put out content out there, you get to see that people will definitely respond to that particular content, but they may not be consistent, compared to when you have a community manager who actually builds a long-lasting and a contributive community towards it. So you could just put up a post and you see maybe 1,000 comments, 1,000 responses and all that. But in the end, all these people, they just come and they just disappear. You don't see them anymore. So I think, it's very important to understand the differences and also get to understand that it's actually a gradual process. It's not something that is done within a blink of an eye and everything is set. So I believe in active communities that are willing to contribute towards everything or towards the goal of that particular project or product specifically, because I think that's one of the major things that will help in pushing the community towards a long-term goal. And And when you deal with a community that is actually contributing towards the goal, you get to see that you won't find it much more difficult compared to when you just have random persons joining in the community and sharing their thoughts and just disappearing at that moment. So you have people who you build relationship with who are just always willing to be part of it. And I usually tell people that community building is not just about maybe creating a group chat and having people inside of it. You could have committee members in different places, and they usually have that same particular mindset of this same community anywhere they go. Like the community I'm building, it's a blockchain community. I call it. Actually, have a motto where we say, "I'm in for the tech," because I've noticed lots of people who are coming into the tech, but they're actually looking for the money. So we use that slang, "I'm in for the tech," and anywhere we go, anywhere we see ourselves, like remember we are in for the tech. In case sometimes we see maybe there's a problem within the crypto markets or anything that happens, we just remind ourselves that okay, this is our goal, this is what we are, to avoid deviating from the other aspect. So it keeps people together, giving them that long-term relationship instead of just being just marketing part of the thing. So yeah.
All
One thing
right.
I want to pop in one more thing real quick and just say, when people are asking for metrics, sometimes I say, but we're talking about people. It's a community of people. So how can we bring in stories of individuals? If, maybe there's not 500,000 people, great. Maybe there's 5 people. Great. Those are 5 human beings that decided to share their time with you today or whatever, like all of these people in this room. So let's celebrate those people. I mentioned it a little earlier about like celebrate the small numbers, but each number represents a human being. And so I feel like just continually reminding ourselves of that, as well as leadership and saying, oh, you know what? I talked to this community member and they said they were so thankful that this community is here because they did X, Y, or Z thing. And that's going to be more impactful, I think, when you share those kinds of things than a chart that says this or that.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And I also want to acknowledge there are times when you will have an executive, a leader who comes and says, we have to have 1,000 people on here by the end of the year, right? And so if you are handed that goal and you don't have a choice in setting that goal, I think going along with what Chris was saying, absolutely, right? Like you now have to aim for that. And I would say if you realize partway through the year, whether that's a couple weeks in, a couple months in, that you're not going to hit that, making sure that you're tracking other things as well so that you can go back to that leader at the end of the year or partway through the year and say, hey, look, I don't think we're going to meet this 10,000 people in our community by the end of the year goal, but here's everything we have seen. Here's the progress that we have made. Here's the people who are coming back month after month. Here's the number of introductions I've made across the company, right? Here's the people who we are meeting through the community who are valuable to what we're doing as a company, whether that's sales leads, whether that's content that they're writing that you're passing off to marketing, whether that's people that have been hired out of the community, all of those types of things. And that's a metric that I've been pushing for several years now, is this idea of like DevRel qualified leads or community qualified leads, where we take that leads aspect and expand it beyond just the sales numbers, but it's people who can bring value back to the community. And so making sure that you're telling those stories, I think, is incredibly important as you're also trying to make sure that you're meeting the metrics and the goals that other people are giving you in the community.
Yeah, I just to hop on this bandwagon that we all are very passionate about. What Mary said, like chef's kiss, because there will always be the metrics that you're required to report on, and you'll have your objectives, your key results, all that stuff. But ROI, or return on investment in community, there's no one metric that exists, and most of the metrics we use are product metrics, which is great, because community in many ways is the product increasingly. However, just because we have to show like member growth or churn or whatever, doesn't mean you can't also spend some time collecting data, metrics, or even anecdotal evidence to show where community is succeeding elsewhere. Something on my podcast, I recently talked to a couple of people.
Plug your podcast. It's fine.
I know. It just sounds gross, but something I recently had in Before the Lock, the two hosts of that show, which is also a community show, we were talking about just, the ability to communicate with any team and show the value to that team, right? So if you're talking to product, how you talk about community, it might be different than how you talk to your CEO or whoever's in charge of your budgets. And it's not to be misleading in any way. It's just that depending on the department, they have a different lens of how the community brings value. And so just getting savvy with the business talk,
Speaking their language.
Yeah, exactly. You gotta talk shop. Something like with my community, testimonials are so huge, and it's so powerful for our marketing and sales initiatives, right? Having those customer or community member testimonials. So, I mean, I can say we sourced 6 testimonials. It doesn't sound that cool, right? But if you can create some language around, like, yeah, we were, we had 10 new testimonials for this last sales project, and that sales project did amazing. So we're involved, And
I was going to say, one of the most important things, I think, and I learned this when we were launching HuffPost Live, is nobody came to me and said what metrics we needed to measure. And one of the most valuable pieces of advice I got was just to do a daily report for my managers, which were the 3 executives of HuffPost Live, and outline a couple things that I observed that went really well, a couple things that didn't go well, and a couple things that I just found very interesting. And at first it took me a half an hour, 45 minutes to come up with these things. But after you do it every day, it was like 5-10 minutes. And I know a lot of people I'm seeing use rosebud thorn now for that same type of thing. I called it my red, yellow, green, my stoplight approach. But whatever you call it, I think never underestimate or wait for somebody to come to you and ask for something. Deliver it to them. And what I found was they started telling me what was interesting to them, which then enabled me to come up with reports that matched what they wanted to see. So it's this kind of evolving process that you are responsible for, especially if you're a department of one in your community, because nobody's going to give it to you. You need to go out and actually create it. And sometimes that takes finding what is going to be interesting to those people and important to those people, so you can do the reporting that they want to
every
see.
day. Wow.
Yeah.
Reporting every day.
I couldn't. I mean, I'm glad you
No,
did
thank
it,
you.
but I couldn't. I think the only thing that I have to add to everything that everybody has said, which has been amazing, is that if you're a new company and you have a new product and you've got a new community and the product has only been sold to 10 people, you're not going to really be able to set the expectation of having more than 10 people in your community right at the start. You have a finite limit. You can only get people in the community as long as the sales team is selling stuff, right? If it's B2B or B2C. So there is that limit. Just know that there's a finite number of limits. I mean, look at Facebook. It's running out of people in the world to get to sign up at this point. So they're not growing much. Just know that it's not infinite growth over time.
Well, I think it depends. If it's you work for a product company, yeah, you're going to have product specific, maybe support communities, but you can also think of a industry type of community that involves people within the industry of, like, for us, data. So it doesn't have to be that product person. It could just be around data governance or data catalog or data whatever, you know what I mean? Like, and then talk about practices around those kinds of things. So I think what you're talking about, David, yes and no, so it just depends on the community you're trying to build at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But for somebody that has only 10 customers, that's when I would think about, well, a product community might not be the right community. It might be more around, the innovational or the thought leadership type stuff, right? So
Right. Advocacy, support, you've got all different angles. All right. So this one is a sly way of asking you to talk about yourself a whole lot. Thinking back when your first community, all right, how quickly did you grow that first community? And as a contrast, how quickly do you grow communities today? And what have you learned along the way?
I can jump in here, but I'm going to caveat everything I say with this is a very personal question, as far as it's dependent on your community, it's dependent on your company, it's dependent on how established the community is and all of that, right? So the first community I was ever involved in was the DevOps community at O'Reilly Media. And this was fairly early on in DevOps. And so it was at a time when it was very much a buzzword. It was very much something that a lot of companies were exploring and looking into. And so it grew pretty quickly because it was a buzzword and because it was really popular. Again, the biggest thing for me there was I cared far more about how much are people participating, who's asking questions, who's answering those questions. How do I connect more with the people who are answering the questions and willing to contribute and give back, right? Because that was extremely interesting to me, because then I could go to those people and say, great, can you answer some questions from my side? Can you help me figure out where else to go to grow the community more? With looking at how I grow new communities today, it's far more about where are people talking about these topics? Where else are they engaging about these things that my company cares about, right? And part of that is process orchestration and process automation are not very well-known terms in the sense of how we solve those issues and the solution that our product provides. And so there's not a ready-made community of people who are already doing these things to step into. But it's a lot more, research and talking to people one-on-one and figuring out the next places to go and learning where a company wants to prioritize things as well.
You're doing good when you get the bobblehead with all of our, we're all going like this. That's when you got a good answer.
I love it.
I'm happy to go next. And I got my start in this field with social media communities, actually, when I was working for careerbuilder.com as their first ever social media and community manager. There were already a number of different social media accounts. I don't remember by the time I left how much those had grown. I'm sure it's on an old version of a resume somewhere, like a percentage that I figured out. So I don't have a number to give you necessarily on that, but I will say that, David, when a question like this comes up for me, it makes me a little nervous, because I think there's a misconception that people think community is growth hacking. And I wanted to chime in on this. Rosie Sherry asked on Twitter the other day, what is, some misconceptions about community? And I meant to say that people think it's growth hacking. Honestly, I don't care how fast a community is growing. Are the members getting their needs met? That's the question I ask. And if there is a executive who is asking about, but did we grow? Did we grow? I'm happy to interject and say, well, we do have this survey saying that the members are, 100% satisfied this month, I wish, or so. So I think that's the question that I prefer to ask, but I'm still glad you posed this, because this question will inevitably come up. How are you growing? How fast are you growing? And so forth. So maybe that's one way you guys can tangent out of that one.
Well, so for my questions and the way that I ask them and why they seem weird, or as an experienced community manager, they're like, why did he ask that? There's this adage that if you want to get an answer to a question on the internet, you go online, you ask the question, you log out, you log into a new account and give the wrong answer, and you'll get an answer faster than if you just wait for them to give you a right answer, because people are more than happy to correct you. So my questions are a little weird and a little wonky on purpose, because it leads us in all kinds of directions.
I think it's
go.
Sorry, David, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Go.
Oh, I was just going to say, I can grow a community really quickly if they come once and never come back.
Yeah,
that's
true.
The biggest thing I learned was that I could say, hey, come check this thing out. And if I post it in enough places, I'll get enough people to pop in just to see what's Deb doing. But do they come back? Not really, unless I've built relationships with them. So yeah, I can grow it really fast if you want a big number of things, a number that doesn't even mean that people are doing anything except that they came and they said, hey, this is cool, and then never came back. So I think that's a good question to ask, just for the fact that do you want people to just come once and then never come back and pretend that we have these vanity numbers of 3,000 people with with 3 people maybe that pop in 3 more times versus, well, we have 20 people or 1,000 people, but they're actually coming back over and over again. And that's the tough stuff. That's what the community and CMX Summit, we were talking about that a lot during CMX Summit. They came up a lot is, how do you get people to come back? You know, like it's easy to like say, hey, we're open, and then people come, but then they don't come back. So I think that's a challenge to the growing a new community. It's great, we can grow, but like, are they going to keep coming back?
So
I have a
you're
little-
saying that if I put an ad up that says register in our community and you too could win a free iPhone, they won't stay engaged after that?
What?
Yeah,
I mean,
just a
unless
little,
you're going to send them an iPhone every day for the
All right.
There you go.
little story.
Brilliant.
I think this is a new topic, David. For you know, is it community or is it
An audience.
Is it appropriate to incentivize your community, right? And how so? I think that could be a whole hour on that.
So, quick story on that engagement piece is on one of my first communities that I built. You know, I was all about trying to find registrations, get people to register, and so I built this whole what I call black belt program internally to get their customers on the community. And so, you know, there's different belts that they can get through, you know, registering them and things like that. And within 4 months, I think I got like 10,000 users, and it was so awesome. And then my boss goes, "So what are you gonna do with those users?" I was like, and you know, he goes, "What's your engagement strategy? You know, what's the plan? How are you gonna?" And I was like, I don't know. So I didn't have a plan. I didn't know. And you know, he's like, "It's okay. You know, we'll figure it out. But you know, let's build that engagement plan to try to engage them. You know, do you have an email going out to them? Do you have, you know, all these tactics to drive?" And I had nothing. So
Yeah.
You know.
I have
that's a good.
Oh, go
Sorry,
ahead.
David. Oh, I think that's also a good thing to think about because, you know, especially working for a company or whatever, they're like, we want huge overnight growth and success. But what does that look like from the member experience? It sucks. Like 10,000 people coming in overnight, it's going to be messy. The same question is going to be asked over and over again. People are going to be confused versus like a slow curated growth where it feels much more just authentic and supported. Like that's where community is. And so again, it goes back to challenging some of the things we're taught in this like hustle culture. And I say that with big air quotes because, you know, it's just gross. And so it's like, it's not about, if you really truly are just like, I'm going to get 10,000 people overnight, you're probably in community for the wrong reasons, or the company that you're working for is just completely on a different planet of what the value of community really is. And to Deb's point about vanity metrics, like, yes, I'm so over vanity metrics. Like they're so meaningless. All these companies are like, we have 30 million unique users. And it's like, how many of those accounts have even bothered verifying their account is real? You know?
Right.
Like,
Yeah, I have
1
been
million?
in communities where, like, in the video game industry, there's a beta period, and you have people that come into the community for the beta, and then you launch and you go live, and there's this sudden huge influx of users that are in the community asking questions, and you're right, it's messy, and you know. I did it enough times over the years that I was in the gaming industry that like 2 weeks before we went live, I would do this big post in the community that says, look, you guys are like my Jedis, right? And we're going to have a whole bunch of Padawans coming, and I need you to help me keep them under control and show them the ropes and show them how to do things and manage how we do the community, you know, report things that are wrong, answer questions, don't say search for it, you know, be helpful. And that has worked for me. So before we kind of move on, I'm going to bring in this one again from Jeffrey Rowe. He says, I feel like the lowest hanging fruit people think of first in terms of community ROI is reducing support and customer success. It's up to the CM to say yes, but we can do more and it won't happen overnight.
Yeah, and I want to bring up one thing I don't think that was hit on, and this has been my experience, is do not compare one community that you've built to another one. because you are setting up false expectations for yourself or undervaluing yourself for what you can do in another one. And I say that from somebody who moved from Chicago and found it so easy to bring 150 people together each month to New York, where it was like pulling teeth to get 10 people together. And, you know, I mean, you just think of that, right? And you would think naturally, I'm going to a bigger city, I'm going to get more people. But, you know, it's like, you know, it's the investment that you make. And this is what has been talked about and what I talk about all the time when people ask me, what's the difference between marketing and community? You know, community is a long tail growth. Marketing is spikes that you can get a long tail growth, but it's always going to go up and down depending on what your spend is. And that to me is not what community is about. It can help that, but it's not what community is about. And so I think, you know, understanding that you shouldn't compare yourself to your past communities or other people's communities necessarily, and that you really need to be easy on yourself for understanding that this is going to take the time and the investment to grow, and it's not going to be something that you see overnight.
100%.
It does.
One of the most valuable things that someone ever told me early on in my career was never compare where you are to where someone else is now. Look at where they were when they were where you are now, right? And kind of build it from there. So if you're wanting to be at a particular place that another company is now, at Twilio community or whoever else, right? Twilio is one that comes up often in tech. Talk to somebody and say, hey, when you were starting out, what were you doing at that point? How did you get to where you are now? And things still might be completely different for you because you might not be dealing with the same community that Twilio is dealing with, but you can always start from those same building blocks and see what works and what doesn't for you.
Yeah, I think it's important to know that what works in my community may not work in your community. So any effort that I put out that is very successful for me, you're more than welcome to try, but don't expect the same results because the audience is different. The reason they're there is different. And it just, you know, a lot of community is failing. You know, we tried that and it failed. Let's try this. It failed. Let's try this. It failed. Let's try this. Oh, success. All right, let's keep doing this, but not make it obnoxious so that they stop liking it, you know?
Yeah.
So
yeah. And I think going back to what we mentioned about metrics earlier, that's a huge one, right? Sometimes the metrics when you're getting started with a new community is I'm going to try a new experiment every week or a new experiment every other week, right? And so it's far less about what's the result and far more about what am I doing? How am I making progress? How can I show you that I'm actively working toward this, even if it's not winding up at the result that we want at the end of the day?
I want to just chime in real quick. And as a former sales rep, I didn't hear this yet, but just really knowing the product or service that your community's problem solves, and knowing the products and the services that your company offers really, really well is going to help you to align. So if you don't know the topic, like I was put in a community where I didn't even really know the topic, I had to do a bunch of research and understand like the background of the topic because I couldn't respond, educate, you know, like very well to people when I wasn't really familiar with the topic at hand. I could just guess it like, yeah, or like, you know, cheer it or whatever, but I couldn't really give an authentic answer until I really understood the actual topic of conversation. So I think that that's like sales 101 is like know your product in and out. And I think it's true for any kind of community management role is make sure you know your company's product or service so that you can then relate that to the customers and being able to support them.
I would say only that you don't have to know it as well as like the persons that engineers that work on it. Like in my case, where I work, I don't have enough time to learn and be smart as those guys. So I tend to stand on their shoulders and ask them for help. But you should at least, when you see a question, you should be able to at least say, I know where I should ask about that, you know, because
right.
it would be impossible.
You don't always have the
for me to
answer,
know
but
everything.
you don't always have the answers. Certainly,
Yeah.
I'm with that. You don't always have the answers.
Yeah,
and that's a good thing because knowing you have the answers is the first step to like your downfall.
Not what you know, but who you know. Yeah, because my company, we deal with internet and fiber optics and Photon and Edge, and I would never there's not enough time for me to do my job and learn all that. So I really lean on people that are smarter than me. So we've got about 5 minutes left, so I think we're going to wrap it up. What I'll do is I'll go around. We'll start with Tim, and just tell us who you are, where people can connect with you if they want to connect to you, and plug whatever you're working on, because I know we have some podcasters in here. I know we have some consultants in here. This is your chance to shine. So we'll start with Tim, and then I'll click through, and as you see your face pop up, it's your time to shine.
All right, I'm Tim McDonald. You can find me on Twitter at @TA McDonald. And at work, you can visit homeroom.club and find out what we're up to there. We're community management solutions as a service. And I will save David from doing this, but go to thecommunitymanager.com, visit us on YouTube, and subscribe to our channel so that we can get a custom URL, which will make it so much easier than me having to find the YouTube channel and copy and paste that long URL every time I want to share it.
You saved me. I hate doing that part. Isabel.
Yeah, well, thanks for the invitation as well. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn and as well the Twitter handle there. And yeah, hope we can connect.
Wesley, reading the book.
Sorry. I am Wesley Faulkner. You can find me on Twitter at Wesley83, and I co-host a lovely podcast called The Community Pulse with Mary Thingvall, who's also on this call. And if you need to get in touch with me, my DMs are open.
Hi, I'm Deb Shell. I'm the founder of Find Calm Here LLC. I help business owners find calm in the process of building an online community. I also am the host of the Community Strategy Podcast. If you put in to the chat Google the Community Strategy Podcast.com, you'll come up to our Find Calm Here website. And I also am writing a book. It's called Creator to Community Builder. You can learn all about that on the findcalmhere.com website.
Very good. Any of the podcasts that are mentioned here today, including the In Before the Lock podcast that was mentioned earlier, there's a post on the communitymanager.com that has all of them listed there. Chris, you're up, so plug yours. You're muted. Yep. There you go.
Chris Detzel, sorry about that. I am the host of Peers Over Beers podcast, all things community. I interview a bunch of community leaders. And you can find me at Peers Beers on Twitter.
Jillian.
Yeah, I'm Jillian Benbow, Director of Community Experience at SPI Media. You can find our community, also my podcast, the Community Experience Podcast, all at smartpassiveincome.com. You can find me on Twitter at Jillian Benbow, or head to my super not cool personal website, jillianbenbow.com.
Jenny.
Hey there, Jenny Weigel, and if you type jenny.community into any browser, you can pick a number of ways to connect with me from there. Also, while you're there, please subscribe to my Substack called All Things Community, where I'm sharing free resources and templates and just thoughts and announcements and events and randomness about community there.
Mary.
Awesome. You can find me on Twitter at Mary_Grace. My website, which I haven't published a lot of content to recently, but marygrace.community. I also put out a weekly newsletter about everything happening in DevRel community, those types of things. DevRel Weekly is what that's called. And as Wesley mentioned, we've got our Community Pulse podcast that we co-host with 2 other hosts as well. So hope to see you around.
As my phone keeps going off. Oh, and me, I'm David Dewald, historian on Twitter and everywhere. If you just type in historian and David Dewald, you'll find me. I want to thank our guests and my co-host Tim McDonald for joining us today, and thank you to our audience, including Jeffrey and I forgot his name. I apologize. I'll make sure I get it in the notes. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe on the platform of your choice. If you would like to be a guest on an upcoming episode or have a topic that you would like us to cover, please head over to thecommunitymanager.com, click on the About Us in the top, and then hit the Contact Us page and just fill out the form. Everything is there, nice and easy. Again, thank you to our guests, and thank you for joining us.
What's next week, David? What's
Next week we're going to be continuing on this. I forgot the title of it, but we're going to wing it. Thank you, everybody.
Community Padawans.
That's right. Newbies. Thank you, everybody.